Danish Queens unite at UNESCO World Heritage Wonder, the secret biodiversity mission that's saving Europe's rarest species from extinction. Welcome to B News. On a breathtaking November day in 2025, two of Denmark's most beloved monarchs stood together on the edge of one of nature's most spectacular masterpieces, the towering white chalk cliffs of Mons Klint, where 70 million years of geological history rises dramatically from the Baltic Sea. On November 13, 2025, Her Majesty Queen Mary and Her Majesty Queen Margrethe II embarked on an extraordinary journey that combined royal duty with environmental activism, visiting a landscape so unique that UNESCO officially recognized it as a World Heritage Site just 4 months ago, in July 2025. This wasn't merely a ceremonial appearance or a token gesture toward environmental consciousness. This was a deliberate, hands-on mission to spotlight one of Europe's most ambitious conservation projects, where scientists, naturalists, and dedicated volunteers are racing against time to save species that exist nowhere else on Earth. As the two queens walked through the innovative Geo-Center Mons Klint, examining the groundbreaking exhibition, Everything is Connected, Biodiversity on Høje Mon, they engaged with a narrative that stretches from the Ice Age to the present moment, from microscopic soil organisms to majestic white cliffs that have inspired artists and scientists for centuries. But the day's most powerful moment came not in the climate-controlled exhibition halls, but outdoors at Stengarden Overdrev, where Queen Mary knelt in the Danish soil and planted marjoram, a seemingly simple act that represents hope for the survival of the endangered black-spotted blue butterfly and dozens of other species teetering on the brink of disappearance. What makes this UNESCO site so extraordinarily special that it attracts royal attention and international recognition? Why are European conservation experts pouring millions of euros into protecting orchids and butterflies on this remote Danish island? And what can this ambitious Life Orchids project teach the world about reversing biodiversity collapse before it's too late? If you're passionate about conservation, fascinated by royal environmental advocacy, and want exclusive behind-the-scenes access to the biodiversity battles happening right now across Europe, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell icon because we're delivering stories of hope and action that mainstream media overlooks. Mons Klint stands as one of nature's most dramatic architectural achievements, a geological wonder that has captivated visitors since humans first gazed upon its imposing presence. Rising up to 128 meters above the Baltic Sea, these brilliant white chalk cliffs represent the compressed remains of countless microscopic marine organisms that lived and died over millions of years during the Cretaceous period. When massive Ice Age glaciers advanced across Scandinavia roughly 70,000 years ago, their incomprehensible weight and movement folded, fractured, and thrust these ancient seabed layers upward and sideways, creating the contorted geological formations visible today. The result is a landscape that functions simultaneously as an open-air museum of Earth's deep history and as a living laboratory where evolution continues its endless experimentation. The UNESCO World Heritage designation awarded on July 13, 2025, recognizes Mons Klint not merely for its visual splendor, though the cliff's stark beauty certainly merits appreciation, but for its exceptional scientific value as an Ice Age landscape that tells the story of our planet's climatic upheavals and the forces that have shaped the world we inhabit. This recognition places Mons Klint alongside fewer than 1,200 sites worldwide deemed to possess outstanding universal value to humanity, a selective club that includes the Grand Canyon, the Great Barrier Reef, and the Galapagos Islands. For Denmark, a small nation that might easily be overlooked in discussions of global natural wonders, this UNESCO designation represents profound international validation of the area's significance and creates enhanced obligations to preserve it for future generations. When Queen Mary and Queen Margrethe arrived at Geo-Center Mons Klint on November 13, they entered a facility specifically designed to help visitors comprehend the multiple layers of significance embodied in this landscape. The center, which Queen Margrethe has patronized for years, serves as the intellectual gateway to understanding Mons Klint's complexity. Through interactive displays, fossil exhibits, and multimedia presentations, it translates geological timescales and ecological processes that might otherwise remain abstractions into tangible, comprehensible narratives. The timing of the Queen's visit, coming just 4 months after the UNESCO designation, wasn't coincidental. It represented a strategic effort to capitalize on international attention and demonstrate Denmark's commitment to responsible stewardship of this newly recognized treasure. The exhibition, Everything is Connected, Biodiversity on Høje Mon, that captivated both queens on November 13 represents far more than a conventional nature display. It embodies a sophisticated understanding of ecological science that has emerged over recent decades, replacing earlier, simplistic views of nature as a collection of isolated species with recognition that all life exists within intricate webs of interdependence. Hoj Mon, the elevated plateau surrounding Mons Klint, hosts an astonishing concentration of biodiversity that seems improbable for such a small geographic area. This richness stems from the unique combination of factors converging here. The calcium-rich chalk substrate creates alkaline soils that support specialized plant communities. The varied topography produces microclimates allowing different species to thrive in close proximity, and centuries of traditional agricultural practices created and maintained the open grassland habitats that many rare species require. The exhibition guides visitors through these connections, demonstrating how geology influences soil chemistry, how soil chemistry determines which plants can grow, how plant communities provide habitat and food for insects, how insects pollinate plants and feed birds, and how this entire interconnected system depends on human management practices that maintain the open character of the landscape. This last point carries particular importance and urgency. The rare orchids, butterflies, and other species that make Hoj Mon special aren't remnants of pristine wilderness, they're products of traditional farming landscapes that have become increasingly rare across modern Europe. For centuries, farmers grazed livestock on these slopes, preventing forest encroachment and maintaining the flower-rich grasslands that specialized species require. As agriculture modernized and rural populations declined, many such areas were abandoned, and forests reclaimed them, causing dramatic declines in grassland-dependent species. The Life Orchids Project, which funded and inspired the exhibition, represents the European Union's recognition that saving biodiversity requires not just protecting nature from human activity, but actively managing landscapes to recreate historical conditions. Queen Mary and Queen Margrethe spent considerable time examining displays that explained this counterintuitive reality, that conservation sometimes means cutting down trees, introducing grazing animals, and otherwise intervening in what superficially appears to be natural succession. The exhibition's title, Everything is Connected, takes on multiple meanings in this context: ecological connections between species, historical connections between traditional human practices and current biodiversity, and the contemporary connections between European policy, scientific research, local management, and species survival. The afternoon's guided hike to Steengaarden Overdrev transformed abstract exhibition concepts into tangible, visceral reality for both queens. Overdrev, a Danish term for traditionally grazed common lands, describes the exact habitat type that the Life Orchids Project works to preserve and restore. As the royal party walked across the gently rolling landscape on this November day in 2025, they traversed ground that, to uninformed eyes, might appear unremarkable, just another patch of Danish countryside. But to the conservation biologists accompanying them, this represented some of Europe's most valuable real estate from a biodiversity perspective. Every square meter hosts species found in few other places, creating a living library of genetic diversity that could prove invaluable as climate change forces species to adapt or face extinction. The Life Orchids Project takes its name from the remarkable concentration of orchid species found on Hoj Mon, more than 20 species, some extraordinarily rare, all dependent on the precise conditions maintained through careful habitat management. But orchids, beautiful and charismatic though they are, represent just the visible peak of a biodiversity pyramid. Beneath them exist hundreds of other plant species, thousands of insect species, countless soil microorganisms, fungi, lichens, and other life forms, all interconnected in ways scientists are still working to fully understand. The project employs multiple strategies to maintain and enhance this biodiversity: reintroducing grazing animals to prevent forest encroachment, removing invasive species that threaten native communities, managing scrub vegetation to maintain habitat openness, collecting and spreading seeds of rare plants to establish new populations, and monitoring species to track whether interventions are succeeding. When project leaders explained these efforts to Queen Mary and Queen Margrethe at Steengaarden Overdrev, they weren't just describing local Danish initiatives, they were showcasing approaches with potential application across Europe and beyond, wherever cultural landscapes host biodiversity that depends on continued human management. The most memorable moment came when Queen Mary participated directly in conservation work by planting marjoram, a purple-flowered herb native to Mediterranean regions that has established populations in warm, dry locations across Denmark. This wasn't a randomly chosen plant for a ceremonial gesture. Marjoram serves as a critical host plant for the black-spotted blue butterfly, a species that has experienced catastrophic declines across Europe as its specialized habitat disappears. Female butterflies lay eggs exclusively on specific host plants, and the resulting caterpillars feed only on those plants, making both butterfly and plant inextricably linked in survival. As the November sun began its descent toward the Baltic horizon and the royal visit to Mons Klint drew to a close on November 13, 2025, the day's significance extended far beyond the immediate participants. The images of two queens united in environmental stewardship, one reigning, one retired but still deeply engaged, sent powerful messages across multiple audiences. For Danes, it reinforced that environmental conservation represents a core national value, worthy of the highest attention and advocacy. For the dedicated scientists, volunteers, and land managers working often in obscurity on the Life Orchids project, it provided validation that their efforts matter and recognition that biodiversity conservation isn't a fringe concern but a central priority. For the international community, particularly other UNESCO World Heritage Sites and conservation projects, it demonstrated best practices in how to leverage cultural capital and public attention to advance environmental goals. And for future generations who will inherit whatever we preserve or fail to preserve, it represented hope that some leaders understand their responsibility extends beyond quarterly economic reports and election cycles to encompass the living systems that make human civilization possible. The Life Orchids project, scheduled to continue through 2027 with a budget exceeding €8 million from European Union sources supplemented by Danish contributions, stands as one of hundreds of life projects working across Europe to halt and reverse biodiversity decline. These initiatives reflect growing recognition that the biodiversity crisis rivals climate change in its potential to destabilize human societies, yet receives far less public attention and political priority. Queen Margrethe's long patronage of Geocenter Mons Klint and Queen Mary's active participation in conservation activities signal that the Danish royal family understands and embraces its role in elevating these issues to public consciousness. The planted marjoram, a small herb taking root in Danish soil, symbolizes the larger truth that conservation requires countless small actions, sustained over time, guided by scientific understanding and implemented by people who care enough to do the difficult work. As Mons Klint's white cliffs continue their eternal confrontation with Baltic waves, gradually eroding grain by grain while simultaneously revealing ever deeper layers of ancient history, they remind us that change is nature's only constant. The question facing humanity isn't whether landscapes will change, they always have and always will, but whether the changes we cause through action or inaction will preserve or destroy the intricate living systems that have emerged over millions of years of evolution. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe traditional European agricultural practices like grazing should be actively maintained for conservation purposes even if they're no longer economically viable, or should we allow natural succession and forest return as a more authentic form of nature? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to share this video with anyone who cares about biodiversity, royal environmental leadership, and the race to save Europe's rarest species before it's too late.